Okay. Hi, I am Louise. I'll be your moderator today on this panel on polyamory and polyamorous relationships. I have Anna, Jay, Mille, and Steve with me. Just a quick disclaimer, you are free to ask any questions you want, but maybe reflect upon why you're asking what you're asking, and if you would reply to that question yourself. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. Polyamory is not really the norm in society, it's monogamy, but clearly these wonderful people have had experiences where they thought, oh, actually, wait, hang on a minute, that doesn't actually make sense to me to only have one partner for the rest of my life necessarily. So I am curious, what happened in your lives to make you question what the rest of society thinks they know to be right? Anna, if you want to kick off.
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Anna. I discovered what poly was about 11 years ago after being in a very long-term relationship that was not really satisfying. And I met a guy that I thought was cute, but then I found he had a girlfriend, and I was like, dang it. But we kept talking a whole bunch, and then one day he let me know that he was actually flirting with me, and I was like, but you have a girlfriend? And he was like, yeah, but we're poly. And I was like, what's poly? And then I looked into it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the thing that fits me that I just didn't know there was a term for. So that's kind of how I got on my poly journey.
Hi, I'm Jay. Well, maybe I would just ask you to reflect for a second on try to remember the feeling you had the last time you fell in love. And I hope all of you have had that experience at some point. And it's kind of this really wonderful, wonderful experience where the rain smells sweeter, the food tastes better, the colors are more vibrant, and every day just feels so wonderful. Of course, you don't want that to last forever. It's a little bit like a drug, and it's eventually you kind of get worn out and you fall into something a little bit more comfortable. But maybe, if you think about it, you didn't really control that. It just sort of happened. And on the other hand, if you tried to force yourself to fall in love with someone, it doesn't really work so well. So I think that's where I would like to come into this from. It's a completely normal thing, and I kind of realized that about, 10 years ago when I came here. But actually, I sort of knew that beforehand. I mean, I was my first girlfriend. I was 15 years old, and I was at the shopping mall with my family, the shame of it. And then I saw over at the corner of my eye, there was my girlfriend. And she was walking hand in hand with my best friend. And I was like, oh, okay, that's weird. And I came up from behind, and I was like, hey, guys. And they had this, ghostly, panic-stricken face. And I just instinctively said, no, it's cool, have a good time. I'm with my family. And at that time, I was like, I knew I was supposed to be really upset about this. This is wrong, and she's cheating on me, and my best friend's betraying me. And yet it didn't really feel like that big of a deal. It was still my girlfriend, still my best friend, and it didn't need to be a conflict. I kind of lived the monogamous life, an exclusive life, all the way until my mid-30s. And then I kind of moved into something a little more open. So I think I'll leave it at that, and we can discuss more.
Absolutely. Mille?
Yeah. I think I've been polyamorous since I was a teenager, when I first started falling in love with people. I remember the first LP. I'm that old. I bought LPs when I was a teenager. The first one I bought was Sting's Dream of the Blue Turtles. On that LP, there's a song called If You Love Somebody, Set Them Free. And that really resonated with my way of thinking and the way I consider what love should be. So my first relationships when I was very young were open. And I never quite understood. I could see that my friends had this need to control their partners and limit their freedoms. But I never quite understood why they had this urge to make contracts and limitations and make their relationships exclusive, because to me it always felt like the greatest gift of love you can give to another person is freedom, the freedom to experience life. And sometimes that includes me, sometimes it doesn't. So I never quite understood that urge. So my parents and my friends back then told me that it's a stage, it's something that will pass when you mature a bit more, when you grow up and become an adult. So at some point I became a little bit more adult, and I started having partners who wanted to discuss with me having a family and living together and potentially getting married at some point. So some of my partners started to suggest monogamy. And so at some point I accepted, because I thought, well, I should give it a shot because now I'm adult and I want a family and kids and things. So my first marriage was monogamous because my partner wanted it. It's quite ridiculous because he's Nigerian and he came from a polyamorous family, or a polygamous family. His father had like 4 or 5 wives. So, but he had this dream, this romantic European dream about Romeo and Juliet and the whole package. So he wanted this European-style marriage with monogamy and a couple of kids and stuff. So I gave it a shot, and I survived in that marriage for about 5 years. He's a really nice guy, and we're still very good friends. But I just felt like this plant that faded away because I didn't get enough air and water. And so after 5 years, we got divorced. And I never turned my back. That was like 15, 16 years ago now. So I know for sure. I mean, I've been there. I've done that. I know it's not for me. I'm married again now to another polyamorous person. So that's where I am.
Steve?
Yeah, hi. Well, I'm probably the oldest person on this panel, even though some of you are clearly more experienced in polyamory than me. For the first 48 years of my life, I'm 51, for the first 48 years of my life I lived monogamously. I had been questioning that for about 20 years, but didn't really do anything about it. I first heard about it from a friend who was from New York, who was living here, and I thought, that's really strange, you know, that would never work. It sounds like free love from the 70s. That's just not realistic. And so I sort of put it away. And then I was married for quite a long time. And yeah, we were in a kind of dissatisfying, for both of us, I think, marriage. But we stuck together. We did the kids thing. And but it was just not working out. And so at some point, we discussed opening our relationship up, and I thought, yeah, we've tried everything else, we've done therapy, we've done everything else, maybe this will save our relationship. Big mistake. Because, and this is not an advertisement against polyamory, it's just, it's not really a way to save a marriage in my experience, because you still have to deal with your shit, excuse my language. So we did that, and then we realized that actually we couldn't sustain our marriage anymore, and we ended up divorcing. We're still very good friends, and we have a kid together, and all of that. But yeah, so that was only 2 years ago. So, you know, I'm still, you know, a debutante in terms of polyamory. So. Yeah, that's my story anyway.
Thank you all. So I want to pick up on something here, because you mentioned your marriage, Steve, and how it didn't fix anything. And you've all talked about the freedom of allowing yourself to feel what you feel. And you mentioned the free love 70s thing. Is that something you meet a lot if you tell people that you're polyamorous, that they have this idea that it's, you know, just free sex, anyone you meet, no nothing, you just pick up whoever you see on a night out? Is that something any of you have come across? I see Jay nodding.
Yeah, just really quickly, and I told a colleague many years back, when I was first sort of getting into the, we used to have meetup groups, And I'm like, this is really interesting to me. And I just mentioned it. She's like, oh, that's just like what, summer '69 and, you know, hippie love. And like, well, it's not quite that. You know, it's a little bit more than that. You know, it's and actually, you know, she was just completely shut it off. And then, but I was surprised. She actually went, well, I got this email from her that afternoon. She says, well, I actually spent the afternoon just researching this, and actually I see that, you know, it is a viable alternative if everyone could be on board with it, you know, and it would require a lot of maturity and communication and all these things that you find on these research sites. And so she said, I apologize for the way I initially reacted. It was just a little bit superficial on the reaction. So, I mean, yeah, some people are going to have that reaction, but it's just because they maybe haven't been exposed to the ideas, and their only point of entry has been like the Woodstock, you know. Yeah.
Because I think that was the next sort of thing with that is that, yeah, and I see Emilia marking as well, because you mentioned the fact that it requires a lot of things, and she found out this by research, because I was going to tie into as well, like, I'm sure it takes more to make polyamory work than the concept of Woodstock. But yeah, Emilia, absolutely.
What I find is that, because I've been very open about being polyamorous for a number of years, I've been in the media and the chairperson of the polyamory organization, very visible. So a lot of people who live officially monogamous lives themselves, but have this fantasy about having an affair, they don't see the difference. So as an openly polyamorous woman, I've been getting a lot of these strange messages and emails from guys who want to meet me in parking lots and strange places because they think I'll fuck anything with a dick because I'm polyamorous. And that gets a little bit exhausting, and not doing it, but, you know, always because people don't seem to not understand the difference between being unfaithful to a monogamous partner and being polyamorous. But as a polyamorous person, you know, polyamory is completely different from being unfaithful, because for me as a polyamorous person, one of the strongest ideals in this is the honesty, the openness. I don't cheat on my husband. I do sometimes date and have relationships with others, but it's always something he knows about. He always knows where I am and who I'm with. It's not something we hide. We don't cheat on each other. We just... So we don't cheat on each other. We just have more than one partner. We just have an open marriage. So, but honesty is really key. So one thing I would wish is for all the wannabe monogamous people to stop bothering the polyamory community.
We'll take that note with us.
Can I add a quick note?
I think
note to that one.
Jay.
And if you're on a dating profile and you want to cheat, please just don't say you're polyamorous, because the people who are polyamorous, they just assume we're all cheating, right? Like,
yeah, not the case. Steve?
I just have a little anecdote about that. I've been slowly coming out about the fact that I'm non-monogamous, or what I would call ethically non-monogamous. I don't actually identify as poly, as many people do, because I think there's a sliding scale of non-monogamy, and I think I'm not there yet. So for me, it's been a slow coming out process, and so I hear from my LGBTQ plus friends that you're always coming out. You come out again and again and again. There isn't one moment where you come out, and I've experienced a little bit of that. Obviously, I don't get the hate because we're in different circumstances. So, but I did experience just before the COVID thing. I was in the UK. I'm from the UK. I've been living here for 22 years though. So, and I went to a friend's birthday party, and we were all sitting on a long bench. I was sitting, and I met someone I've known about 25, 30 years ago. And we were talking, and I just happened to mention the fact that I was in a non-monogamous relationship. And it was like poison. It was like she suddenly oh, I couldn't do that. And I'm saying, well, I didn't expect you to do it. You know, that wasn't really, you asked me, I told you, it was part of my story, it wasn't your story. But she suddenly started moving in a different direction in a little bit the same way that, you know, it assumes that because I have more than one partner that I'm going to fuck anybody or want to fuck anybody or try and get off with anybody. And it doesn't work like that. So, but there is that stigma around it suddenly that I was this sort of predatory person because I wasn't in a monogamous relationship. So it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, it certainly sounds it. So you've all focused quite a bit on the sexual aspect of it, because I think that's really what most people tend to jump to first when you mention polyamory, is that, the possibility to shag loads of different people. But as the word indicates, polyamory is about obviously loads more than that, and certainly about love. And Anna, you've been so quiet. But you mentioned someone and you had feelings for them and they already had a partner or a girlfriend at least. But then clearly also had an interest in you, and that it sounded like it was a little bit like your gateway into the poly community. How has that, I was about to say lifestyle and I quite hate that word, and I know we all do, but polyamory for you, how has it affected your view on love, or was it always as it is now?
I mean, well, it changed it in some ways. I mean, it was more like finding a term that fit the way that I felt, and also being like, oh, okay, so how I feel is not wrong. All right. But I think it was mostly, so like with that story, so he and I were chatting one day, and then he was like, oh my God, my partner, she just had the most amazing sex of her life last night. And I was like, oh, wow, like, what did you guys do? He's like, no, with someone else. I was like, but she just had the most exciting of her life with not you, and you're happy about that. Like, how does that work? And he kind of explained, he's like, I love this person, and I want them to be happy, and I want them to have all the best experiences in the world. So because I love them, I'm happy when they're happy. And like that was the thing that resonated, and I was like, oh my God, I want this. This is how I want my life to be, because it makes sense, right? I mean, it's the same thing. If she had said like, I found a new hobby, it's the best hobby in the world, you know, everyone would be like, yeah, of course you want to be excited about your partner having that hobby, because it's something that makes them happy. But all of a sudden, because there's sex stuff in there that people are like, oh, whoa. I mean, I want you to be happy with everything, but not like loving other people, because there's this idea that if you love someone else, then you don't love me as much. And I think it's this fear of loss that people have. Like, what if they love this other person more than me? What if they leave? Like, what if I lose something? But you kind of, I think poly people will say, like, you learn that love's kind of infinite. I mean, it's like if you have a kid and you love that kid, and then you have a second kid, you don't like stop loving the first one, right? You just also love the second one. And I think, you know, we have so many ways that you can love. I mean, you can have more than one friend, and you know, more than kids, your families can expand. You can love people in all these different ways, but somehow, as soon as there's genitals involved, it's like, nope, it's one, or like, you know, you'll be gone. And the part that actually doesn't make sense to me anymore once I thought about it that way. So
I assume the rest of you have similar experience, Jay?
Yeah, maybe I want to come back to what I started with at the beginning. Maybe you come back to that idea of that memory of you falling in love. Now, let's assume that you have that experience. There's someone you meet, and for some reason you fall in love with that person. It doesn't mean that's reciprocated or anything, but you have that, wow. And if you're in a relationship already, like an exclusive relationship, then you have a conscious choice to make, right? You can't just be, you know, if it's exclusive, you can't just go run off and, well, that would be cheating. Or you have a conversation with your partner, like, this has happened. What people tend to do, I think, in exclusive relationships is they suppress it. Because they don't want to tell their partner that it would be really hurtful, perhaps. So it's not the stereotype, it's not the fairy tale. Like when you fall in love with someone, you're in a partnership, it's supposed to be you and that person is the apex of your universe, and nothing else will ever come in there. But that's not realistic. We do fall in love. And Brené Brown, she says, you know, you can't selectively numb that. So when you try to suppress it, you're suppressing just the feeling of being in love or being able to love anybody. And that's not really healthy for the relationship either. So I guess my perspective then in that love is that you could still be exclusive. But I think it's better if you can just, hey, I had this really sparkly moment with this person at my work. Nothing's going to happen. I've made the conscious decision that I'm going to be with you exclusively. But just so you know that I might be a little bit flaky for a few weeks because this is going through me. And I have to weather it out because I've chosen to be with you. And that's fine. But I think that's much more healthy to say that you can do that. And the point being that, that for your partner, for being in love, you don't want to suppress that in your partner. And I'm talking about open relationships here or just even exclusive relationships. You really don't want to suppress their emotional capacity because that makes them miserable and resentful. And that's not really healthy. So even in exclusive relationships, I think polyamory does have something to offer.
Yeah, very important. Steve?
I just want to pick up on something Jay said, and I think there's something about... I think I'm inspired by the sex and relationship advisor Dan Savage, Savage Love podcast. Check it out, very good. Where he talked about the thing that he experienced on the gay scene in Seattle and San Francisco and New York, was that when he met partners, if they were going to start a relationship, the first question they would discuss was, are they open? Are they monogamous? What degree of monogamy were they going to have? And I think, interestingly, in the sort of normal, quote-unquote, normal heteronormative model is that monogamy is the default. That everything else is a kind of slightly strange, but we'll work it out. Whereas I think you could argue very much that there isn't really a default. We've just accepted this norm that monogamy is the default. Polyamory, non-monogamy, could also be the default. I think the one thing we can learn really very much, there was a lot we can learn from the LGBTQ plus movement, I think. But one of the really important things I think we could learn is that question. It's not to just assume that there's a default, that it's fine if we want monogamy, but we should maybe discuss it at the beginning of a relationship rather than when things get difficult. What will we do if we suddenly feel the attraction's gone? What will we do if we feel attracted to other people, and so on and so forth? Have these conversations. They're the difficult conversations, but perhaps they're the ones that we need to have at the beginning, not when things are difficult.
Oh, definitely. Mila?
I would just like to add that, yeah, like you said, we tend to regard monogamy as the default model for how love should be acted out. But it wasn't always like that. If you look at the world, if you look at history, human beings didn't always live like that in every culture of the world. So I think the idea of monogamy was introduced when human beings went from living this hunter-gatherer lifestyle to agricultural lifestyle. That's when patriarchy and exclusivity in relationships was introduced. If you want to read about this, there's a very good book by Chris Ryan called Sex at Dawn, where he sort of examines how the idea of monogamy was introduced in modern culture. So when people went from hunter-gatherer to agricultural society, they introduced the idea that a man could own a piece of land, a house, a few cows, some seeds, and a wife. And the offspring that he produced together with his wife, he was certain that those were his kids. Because it wasn't like that in the larger communities that people lived in before that. So this idea of owning your partner or having exclusivity over your partner is something that wasn't there from the dawn of days. It's something we have learned to accept. And then in our part of the world, it's been sort of reaffirmed by the church as the morally right thing to live a loving life with a partner. It's also been reaffirmed by modern psychology it's been pathologized to want to have more than one partner. So there's a lot of these cultural institutions that have reaffirmed this model of the monogamy being default. But when you think about it a little bit more, there might be other ways of living a natural life as Homo sapiens.
Absolutely. And I think because now you talk about how society and norms and other kinds of cultural institutions are quite restrictive in terms of how we live our lives, not just in terms of love and polyamory, but overall we talk about the LGBTQIA community. And I think for those of us who are part of that, we have already, to some aspect, had to reconsider ourselves and how we fit in to the rest of society by breaking their norms. But you've all talked about a little bit about how when you've been in monogamous relationships, this whole thing where we feel entitled to a partner and how we actually also then restrict their happiness by putting limits on what they can and cannot do. Do you feel within polyamory that there's a larger sense of freedom to be you? Do you feel happier in yourself? Like your relationship with yourself as well, because you've all been in monogamous relationships, but now as polyamorous on just non-monogamous people, is there a change, do you feel, in that, just as in yourselves as people? Anna?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I am in tune with myself better. Like, I feel like I live a bit more authentically with my feelings, because I don't feel like some of the feelings I have are, like, not okay. And, yeah, I lost what I was going to say.
That's okay.
But I think it's like, I like having freedom in my life. I mean, I've moved to another country. I like that I don't have to follow someone else's plan, right? I can date who I like depending on who I have feelings for. I can travel the world to whichever places that I want to go. So, I mean, I think for me, it's not just about love. It's kind of how I want to live my whole life.
Yeah. Yep. Jay?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I was thinking about that. And, you know, when I was exclusive, I think, Steve, you made that point that it is kind of the default monogamy. And I didn't think much about it. It was just, when it got to a relationship, it was just assumed. We didn't say, let's consciously be monogamous. It was just, of course, we wouldn't see anybody else. We would be together. And I am, like, naturally kind of an agreeable, people-pleasing person, especially back then. And just kind of went along with it. And this is what you do to be a good boyfriend. But then it's like, I guess I matured a little bit more, and I kind of thought about, like, what does it mean to be loved or love someone? And that's going to be a personal thing, you know. How do you feel loved? And there's love languages and stuff, and how do you express love? And you're not always going to agree with your partner or someone else. But like for me, it was a lot about autonomy, in that loving someone really meant respecting their autonomy and having my own autonomy respected. So if you know, my partner needed to, for some reason, or wanted to do this or this or this, I mean, I actually got a lot of joy from that when they are. I found that really attractive, that my partner has this free will and does these things. It makes her human, you know. It's part of that experience, not just trying to please me. So I guess that was the way I kind of evolved into it. And I don't think necessarily one caused the other. I think they just sort of came together at the same time.
Steve?
Yeah, I think, has it changed me as a person? I think, yes, it has. I think, like Anna said, I think I live more authentically with my own feelings. I mean, one thing most poly people will tell you, or non-monogamous people tell you, is a lot of talking. There's a lot of processing. How do you feel about? Would it be okay? What is this? What is your limit? What are my limits? What do we want? We have to constantly talk about that. And I think in monogamous relationships, my own experience of monogamy was that you took a lot of things for granted. You assumed and you didn't discuss. And I think in that sense, that's infected the rest of my life as well. I think when I'm dealing in relationships more broadly with people I meet, generally, I tend to be more honest. I can do it politely, you know. I'm British, so I was brought up not to be too honest. You just have to be polite. But I think it was I'm more straightforward, and I'm in a way that I hope is open and friendly and doesn't. I'm not, you know. So I think some people take honesty as just being an arrogant prick, and I don't see it like that. My honesty is more about, I try to find a way where I can be authentic with myself and my needs and what I need, and with the people that I interact with on a daily basis, as well as my partners. And that takes a lot of conversation, a lot of dialogue, and that certainly hasn't been my experience in monogamy throughout the years, in all my monogamous relationships. So, yeah, it's changed me.
Yeah. Anna?
I remembered what I was going to say.
Yes, go for it.
I found, so monogamous relationships, there's a lot of expectations, right? If you're dating someone, then you have to be the person that fulfills all their needs. So, you know, if you're an extroverted person and you're with an introvert and they want to stay home all the time and you're just like, but I don't want to do that, right? Like, you're forced, you're the only person for them. So you have to do the things that make them happy. And if if your sexual needs don't match, right? Well, if they have a higher sex drive than you and you don't want to have sex with them, right? But you have to because they can't have it with anyone else. So now it's like, well, I have to like want to have sex even if I don't want to. Or there's a lot of it's having like different needs and things, and the mismatch between those that people are like, but we're dating, you have to do this thing. Whereas, if you're poly, then you don't have to. I mean, I can have one person that, like, I don't know, I love going to museums with, and that's like my museum person because we both really love that. And then I have another partner that maybe hates going to a museum, but they like doing something else, right? So you can just have different people meet the different needs you have without this expectation that you have to meet all of their needs. So you kind of enjoy the time you have with particular people doing things that you both mutually like and not feeling guilty or horrible for not meeting the needs that you're not good at meeting.
Yeah, very important. Mila, I saw you. Yep.
Yeah, I think I would like to point out that in the polyamory community, we have people from all the different groups of LGBT+. All the minorities are represented within polyamory because you don't have to have a certain type of gender or sexual orientation to be polyamorous. That can go for anybody. But one thing that people may not realize is that we have quite a few asexual people in polyamory, because as an asexual person, polyamory is a really nice way of being able to have a romantic relationship with a partner who can have a sexual relationship with others. So it takes pressure away from the asexual person and allows that person to be in a romantic relationship without feeling that pressure. So it's also a free space for people who don't want to have so much sex. And I do also think that most people will experience, if you look at the whole lifespan, that there are periods of life where you feel a stronger need for sex and periods of life where you don't feel so much like having sex. And so in many monogamous relationships, that's actually something that therapists make a lot of money on because it causes a lot of problems. But if you're in an open relationship, that doesn't have to be a problem because you will allow your partner to just go somewhere else and have his needs fulfilled if you are not in a position where you're able to meet your partner's needs. So it also creates a space for people who want to be less sexual.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. I know quite a few of the friends that I have who are also in the polyamorous community are asexuals and have mentioned that particular aspect of it being, well, I can now very freely enjoy a emotionally intimate connection to a person because I don't feel like I'm cheating them out of something or whatever. And I think it's very important what Anna said is that we as people are just multifaceted and have so many aspects, and thinking that one person in the entire world is going to fulfill and meet all of those aspects in a manner that's, meaningful and whole is not really doable. And I know from my personal perspective, it's what's soured so many monogamous relationships is that you feel a little bit left out in some aspects, and then in other aspects you feel like you aren't being seen or heard or acknowledged in the way you want to. But yeah, I think, and for me in polyamory, that doesn't happen as much. It does happen, but you mentioned, Steve, this whole aspect of communication and suddenly having to do that a lot more. Felt a little bit like therapy to start with, but is that a thing, that the aspect of communication that you all find is something that happens a lot more? There's a lot of nodding, yeah, in polyamorous. Do you have any comments tied to that? I mean, for me, that's been a very difficult thing at the start.
Yeah.
Mille?
I think I've spoken to a lot of polyamorous people over the years, and it's something that goes for everybody who tries to live a polyamorous life. It will not work if you don't have good communication skills. And if you don't have good communication skills, it's something you have to develop along the way, because it does take humongous amounts of communication. And I think we all agree to that? Or?
Yeah, can I add a little little bit of dissent? But I mean, I was awful at communicating and in my monogamous years, and it was when I found the polyamory community. We had these social nights where we talk about these things. Wow, this is like kind of mind blowing. Like, well, you really do talk about these things, and yeah, I'm still not the best at it, so I've gotten much better. But like on the forums and stuff, I mean, sometimes I think I would agree with you 100% that you definitely need, it's a definite necessary condition, and it's not a sufficient condition. It's not always going to solve it. Sometimes, you can fetishize communication to death, but sometimes there are just some irreconcilable differences, or sometimes there's something that just can't really be expressed in words, or so I will agree that you definitely have to be communicating well and everything, but it's not going to save everything.
Yeah, Anna?
Yeah, well, I think even more than just being able to communicate with other people, you have to be able to self-reflect a lot. If you're not just sitting there just expecting that some monogamous person is going to read your mind and fulfill all your needs, because that's kind of what usually happens, right? You're not conditioned to communicate, but you're not conditioned to reflect. Like, what are my needs? How important are the things? Like, how important is, sex or something else, or spending time with different people? And you have to kind of know yourself. I mean, a lot of poly people say, like, your first relationship's with yourself. And as corny as that sounds, it is kind of true. Like, if you're not expecting one monogamous person to fulfill all your needs, then it's up to you to do that for yourself, to find the people, or, decide, okay, that thing isn't as important, or, actually spending time alone is really important to me, and I want to do more of that. So, I'll put a date night with myself on the calendar because I just need to not be social. And you have to understand that, when you're with other people, they trigger things. I mean, jealousy is a thing. It's not like jealousy goes away when you're poly. It's not like all of a sudden poly, I feel no more jealousy at all. Like, you still have those feelings, but if you can figure out like why you're jealous or how that happens, and then you can communicate it to the people that you're with, then it doesn't necessarily go away, but you learn how to deal with it. Because you can't control your feelings, but you can control your reactions, right? If I get jealous and just scream at people, right? Like, I mean, it's fine for me to feel jealousy. It's not fine for me to just like scream at my partner, right? So you have to kind of first figure yourself and your own emotions out, and you have to be responsible for that. And then you have to be able to communicate with people, right? If you have a partner who's like, okay, when you do this specific thing, it hurts me. Can we figure out, like, maybe every time after you're with someone else, you just send me a text message, right? And then I'll feel better, and they can agree that that's a thing that they're willing to do for me. But then we have that communication, and then, I learn that way to alleviate that jealousy in that situation. But if you think you have jealousy with one person, and then you multiply that by many people, right? Maybe you'll have all of these jealousy triggers with all of these people, so you're going to feel a lot more jealousy. But that just forces you to kind of confront it and deal with it and learn how to, like, figure out your own triggers and then communicate. So then maybe the next partner, you feel the jealousy, you're like, okay, I know what this feeling is because I had it with that person. And then instead of just getting upset or resentful, right, you can just jump to communicating immediately. You're like, okay, so obviously I have this problem, and this is how I solved it before. Like, can we talk about it?
Yeah. Very good. Charlotte, we had questions? Yes?
We have a couple of questions. I have a question online also, but I think I'll save it for later.
Hey, I was just wondering how you guys have had experience with hierarchy of relationships. If you do that, if you recommend that, if you feel like it's I feel like the whole idea is you have to talk about everything. It could go any way for everybody. It's different, but just any personal experiences with that. Thanks.
Steve?
Yeah, I think I think I said earlier that I think non-monogamy and polyamory on a sliding scale, and I think there's sort of the ideal, if you like, is some kind of relationship anarchy where there's no hierarchy. I don't know how many people who actually are completely non-hierarchical. There are some who say they are, so I'm not. I live in a hierarchical relationship in the sense that I have a primary partner, and but I think the important thing that we recognize in that primary relationship is that's only a stage. It may develop in different ways in which we feel differently with our other partners, and so there may become a flatter structure, non-hierarchical structure. It is super complex because, of course, we have to make agreements, but we want to respect our other partners and their needs and what they... So in that primary situation, it can become tricky. But again, we come back to this, a lot of processing, a lot of dialogue, a lot of... Yeah, and I would like to do a bit more with this partner, or is that okay? What do you think? And then the other partner might say, yeah, but I would like this more. And of course, they have a claim there. So it is an ongoing thing. So I would say in my relationships, there is a hierarchy, but I don't see that as a stage that we will always be at. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But the possibility is there to develop a flatter structure. It at the moment it's not. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think Anna was first. No? Jay, we'll go for it.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a really good one that comes up, and it is an active debate on the polyamory forums because, yeah, right, because no one wants to feel like, oh, you're number two, you're not in the, or where are you in the ranking this week, and it can be kind of dehumanizing, perhaps. But on the other hand, maybe there's certain situations where they fall into something where it feels comfortable that way. In my own personal experience, when I first came into polyamory, I was into the relationship anarchy, and I was completely non-hierarchical. I was just seeing different people. It was really exciting, also really exhausting. I was out every night with different people, and I couldn't keep whose grandmother was it that was sick? I can't remember all this, and maybe I've just lost the skill. But and after that, I just had to take a break. I'm not seeing anybody. I'm going to be by myself, and this is what Anna. I just need some time for reflection. And since then, I've been the model I've had is more the open relationship, and that's been better for me. I have long distance lovers, so that just sort of naturally fits that they would be not like a primary partner, and I have someone here that's my girlfriend. Yeah, I think that, and I have other things I want to do in my life too, besides just have relationships and communicate about them. I like to, do music and art and other things, and I have work, and so it is like you want to have a happy life balance, and there's why love is unlimited, time is. So, yeah.
Very good. You remembered, Anna. Great.
Yeah, so I actually consider myself, at least right now, solo poly. So that is someone I don't imagine my life having living with a primary partner or mingling finances, having kids, mostly because I just don't want to have kids, period. But it doesn't mean I don't want to have serious relationships, and I do have relationships with people, and I do care about them. But it's not that I consider all of them equal. I accept that they exist in a way that fits both of us. But I mean, it is hard because then if I date someone who is in a primary relationship, right, I know that I will always be second or third or whatever. I will never matter as much as the other person. But I think as long as you set that expectation ahead of time, I know someone's in a primary relationship, so this will never be, a full-time like move-in thing, which is also fine in my case because like I don't want that. So in a little bit I was like, all right, you're already living with someone else, so you're never gonna want that with me. Super. So again, it kind of takes a bit of the pressure of expectation off. But as long as I know that ahead of time, right, like I can set my expectations, and then I can also, you know, I think you can control how much you love people or how much you expect from them, right? So if I have that expectation, it's never going to be more than this amount, or at least, you know, right now, then that's fine. And I'm not going to think you're my Prince Charming, happily ever after anyway. So I think it's having those conversations and being aware of it and knowing what you can accept. I mean, if you're someone that's just like, will absolutely fall in love with this person and you want them in your life every minute of every day and they're already with someone else, then, you know, maybe you just like don't start down that path.
Yep.
Second
There was a
question.
second question, yes?
I have so many questions. Hi. Can I raise this? Thank you. Okay, so have any of you made this work within a family with kids? And also, I'd like to add that you sound kind of prejudiced and condescending against monogamous people, like running from responsibility. And also, let's say you are with a partner for many years and you really love them, you feel attachment, and then suddenly you fall for someone else. You fall in love. What makes you stay? Yeah, what makes you stay in that relationship? I'd like your reflection on stability and actually staying, not running around for any kind of pleasure.
I'm gonna
And back to the question with family and kids.
I'm gonna stop you right there and point out that this is a panel on polyamory. I get where you're coming from.
I'm polyamorous myself, so.
Yeah, I know, but from where I am standing, that's not what's been presented here. I mean, from Steve's story, it was a marriage that didn't work. But I think if it's a healthy marriage and you might absolutely come in on this, and you fall in love with someone else, as they explained earlier as well, there's communication about that. I don't think it necessarily means that you leave the partner just because you get feelings for someone else. But Millie, you indicated?
No, that's because you asked about living a life with children. I have a son, he's 17, and I've been openly polyamorous for the past 10 years or so. So when my son and I moved in with my husband now, he more or less, well, we didn't talk so much openly about it in the beginning because we thought he was too small to understand. But then a few years later, we decided that now he's old enough to have this conversation, and we wanted to be honest with him because I wanted my son to know that some of the guests who come to the house are boyfriends, girlfriends, partners, that people that we love, that we consider a part of the family, and so on. So we sat down together with my son when he was about 12 or 13 and explained to him, this is the way we have decided to live, and we agree on this, and this person is actually partners and more than just friends. So my 13-year-old son, he looked at me and then he laughed and he said, "Ha! You think I didn't figure that out myself? Do you think I'm stupid? I mean, I have brains, mommy." So he totally figured that out himself. So he was not surprised at all. And then I asked him, so are you okay with that? How do you feel about it? And he said, yeah, sure. I mean, I can see that you guys are fine with it. So, and I can see that. I mean, my husband, he's got another girlfriend that he's had for about 5 years now, and she walks in and out of our house, and she's part of the household. At the moment, she's staying there with my husband and my son while I'm in Copenhagen, and everyone is fine with that because my son, he can see that her name is Susanne, that Susanne and I are good friends, that we don't have a conflict with each other, and that this is something that doesn't go against our norms, and that we don't have moral issues with this. We are very open about living a polyamorous life, and we are not ashamed of anything. So my son is just raised that this is our way of living, and we're not ashamed of that. So he knows that there are other ways of living. Most of his friends, they are raised in monogamous families, obviously. But we talk very openly about it, and he is not judgmental at all. And a few years ago, I was a part of a TV program about polyamory, and many of my son's friends, they saw me on TV, and they came and said, "Oh, that's so cool that you stand up for what you believe in." And I mean, the prejudice doesn't come from young people, from teenagers. The prejudice, the judgment comes from, in my experience, from the older generation, not from the kids.
Steve, you indicated as well.
Yeah, I just want to address the issue around prejudice against monogamous people. I absolutely do not and will not accept that prejudice against monogamy, because I lived for myself for 48 years in monogamous relationships. Some of them were very happy. Some of them were the best experiences of my life. The point I was trying to make around monogamy was that rather than just being the default, that it is something you ask yourself at the beginning of a relationship. And if you want to live in a monogamous relationship, it should be a conscious choice rather than just a sort of unconscious choice. Because life changes, we change over time, we discover new things about ourselves along the way in a long relationship. And I think that would give, if you start that dialogue early on, it gives you a foundation from which you can discuss things. So I absolutely think monogamy is a legitimate choice. I just want it to be a choice, and I hope people will choose it consciously. I absolutely don't have a problem with monogamy. To use an old cliche, most of the people I love are monogamous. So you know, I have a few friends that are not, but most of the people in my life are monogamous. So I would be cutting off most of my network if I had a prejudice against the way they live their lives. I really don't.
Jay, did you?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I hope you didn't get that impression from me when because I had been consciously trying to be aware that during this panel, that monogamy is not a wrong choice or an inferior choice or somehow that we're more evolved or anything like that, because it's not the case. It's just our personal experiences fits better for us or for me. And like Steve, I lived most of my life in exclusive relationships, and most of my relationships have been exclusive. It's just I've moved into a different direction, and that was right for me. Most of my friends and the people I love are monogamous. My parents are monogamous. It is a norm, and I agree with you. Just make it a conscious choice. I think that's the just to reiterate what you said. Yeah.
Anna, do you want to weigh in on this, or?
I mean, I feel the same. I think monogamy works well for most people. Like, I don't think everyone should be poly. I don't think it's the right relationship style. I think it works well for a lot of the population and the way the society is. It's not right for me. I don't want to be monogamous ever again. I don't feel like it fits with my core values. But as long as it fits with what other people want and make them happy, then that's fine.
I think it's been a point that's been made in quite a few other panels this week as well, is that no one here is trying to dictate what's right or wrong for anyone else. That's the entire point of this week in general. And for you, all of you, monogamy was not the way. For some people it is, because again, lots of different kinds of love, lots of different ways to love. There's another question?
Yes, there is another question.
Yes, how do you date polyamorously? How do you put yourself out there? How and when do you talk about polyamory? Often with people who don't even know what it is, because we are so mononormative, or whatever you call it, so they would probably get shocked just by the suggestion there's another way to do stuff. So how do you put yourself out there, find new people in the dating situation?
Steve?
I think honesty is the best policy. So if you are on dating sites, and I am and have been, then it's in my profile. So, and also on some dating sites, it's actually part of the algorithm. So they only match you with people who are either willing to enter into or consider the possibility of a non-monogamous relationship, or people who actively choose it as their lifestyle. So yeah, for me, it's 101. I have to put it out there at the very beginning before anything happens, because I don't want to get, a few months into a new relationship and then say, well, yeah, but by the way, you're not going to be the only person I'm seeing, you know. And then, you know, maybe you've formed all kinds of bonds and so on and so forth. So for me, it's important that it's on the table from day one, from the first moment, yeah.
Anna?
Yeah, so I have it right on my profile, like on dating profiles and stuff, because I want it to be upfront. As I kind of use it almost like a filter. I don't want to waste my time with people who are absolutely sure they want monogamy and then meet and we talk a bit and then I'm like, oh yeah, and I'm poly, and they're like, oh, that's not going to work. And, you know, like I've invested time or maybe started to have feelings for someone and then it's kind of a no-go. So I would rather have it kind of upfront. I mean, it makes the dating pool like a hell of a lot smaller. That's for sure. You got to be a lot more patient. But I think by putting it up front and like making sure people know it from day one, I mean, you don't have as much quantity, but eventually the quality comes. But it's not easy, for sure. But it also helps to have, you know, poly groups and meetups and things. So if you can find other like-minded people, sometimes you connect.
Yeah. Jay, are you?
Sure, actually, if you have any advice, I'd be happy to take it because, especially during Corona times, you know, it's I haven't really been on a date in months. So, yeah, I don't really like the dating sites. That's just my thing. And sadly, I tend to like fancy a lot of people that end up being monogamous or exclusive by predilection. So, yeah, but occasionally, you know, I will meet someone that's open and then it happens. But yeah, I think I'm much more about a real world person than online stuff, although I have tiptoed in there. And yes, I would put it on my profile because it's a little awkward. Oh, second date. By the way, I didn't tell you about I had a girlfriend. Oh, yeah. Oops, my bad. That's not going to go well. So yeah, it's easier just to have it up front and weed it out, and yeah. But it is hard.
Mille?
Yeah, I agree that I also put it up front when I have profiles on dating sites. It's there. I don't use dating sites much. I like to meet people in polyamory community, in real life, in social gatherings. I think because I know that I've tried monogamy and there's nothing wrong with monogamy, it just doesn't work for me. And because I'm so certain about that, it would not make sense for me to go on dates with people who consider themselves monogamous or who are looking for a monogamous relationship. Just like it wouldn't make sense for me to go on a date with a person who's only attracted to men. It would be the same kind of thing for me, that it would be a waste of time, right? Wasting that person's time and wasting my time, because I'm not a man, right? So, yeah, and I'm not monogamous. So there's no need to waste other people's time, or, you know, it only wastes time if you're not upfront, in my experience.
Yeah, I think it's important to tie into this is the fact that we're talking like romantic dating, because of course meeting people in general is wonderful, but if you're going on a date, you have certain expectations towards that, and going on a date with a person that you know you're not going to have any sort of fulfilling relationship with, in a sense that you're just at completely different points or aspects of life. Well, Steve?
Sorry, I just wanted to say something I forgot to say. It's very much, as I said, I don't identify as poly at the moment. I identify as ethically non-monogamous. And for me, it's an ethic that I'm upfront and straight with people about who I am, what I am, how I relate, and so that they can make an informed choice about whether they want to be involved with me or not. So that's key from the start for me. So sorry, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. Anna, last comment, and then we have 2 more questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think it's important because I don't think you can convince someone to change the relationship style that they want. I mean, I've dated people who were like, yeah, I think maybe like we could talk about being open, but they really weren't. They thought I would fall in love with them, and then of course I would love them so much that I would become monogamous again, right? Which didn't happen because it's not about a person, right? It's like my philosophy for me. So I don't want to date someone and be like, well, I'll just get them over to the poly side, right? They'll like me so much they'll accept to be poly or open. So I think it's important to put that up front, because you can't talk someone into the type of relationship they want just based on a person they meet.
Yeah, and again, with this panel, this is just an introduction to your experiences with polyamory, so that that information is shared with everyone who's here. And for some of you, it might be really great sounding, and for others, it will be like, right, nope, not for me. 2 more questions?
Yes, the first one was the one I was saving for later. This is now, because it ties in with the last question we just had. What are good ways of getting in touch with the Copenhagen polyamorous community?
Where do we go?
Where do you meet?
Steve?
Most of us, I think, are on the Facebook groups, social media, generally, sort of, and it's people of all different levels of non-monogamy, polyamory, different sexual identities, different gender identities. So it really is a very mixed bag, and people have very different approaches, and there are very lively discussions. But you can join in, you can get to know people there. Often there are poly events that Mila mentioned. I haven't actually been to any, but I will. But those are ways that you can get involved. And there's also an organisation which Mila will probably be better to talk about than I would be.
Yeah.
Well, there are, as Steve said, many different Facebook groups. I think we are all in a Facebook group for English-speaking polyamorous persons in Denmark, because there's a community of people who are polyamorous who don't speak enough Danish to be in the Danish groups. So that's where we are connected. But there are many. If you just do a Facebook search for polyamory, you will find lists of many different groups. Some of them are open, some of them are secret, some of them you need invitations for, some of them are more specific for poly people who are into kink, and poly people who are into swinging, and poly people who are queer, and poly people who are all the sorts of different little communities. So you have to start, being curious and do a search. And within these Facebook groups, there are a lot of private people, private initiatives, setting up little social meetings where you can meet other polyamorous people. Of course, during COVID, there's been less, but usually there are meetings every month or so, people just setting up a meeting somewhere. So, yeah.
Yeah? Do you, Jay or Anna, have any other? No, I think the internet is probably, and social media is mostly where it's at these days.
I think so.
Yeah.
There's actually, while you've been talking, there's another question. So we have 2 more to go. Any good advice on how to tell your partner that you would like to have an open relationship? If you consider this an open relationship.
Anyone?
Just to clarify the question, it's someone who's probably in an exclusive relationship and they want to open it up.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
I mean, because you haven't really, from what I've gathered, you haven't really been in an exclusive relationship and then started from there, or have I got that wrong? You did, Steve, yeah, and that didn't work out that well, but...
I think it's really important to examine your motives. If you're in a long-term monogamous relationship and you're considering opening up, think about what you want from that. I think, will the problems you have, are there problems in your relationship? They probably won't be fixed by adding new people to that pot. So I think you need to kind of consider working on the issues. If you have a really well-functioning relationship with your primary partner already, and you're considering opening up, I think if you've got a good dialogue, that will help. If you're worried about that, you can maybe get a poly-friendly therapist involved who can mediate. There are quite a few of them out there, and there's a whole list of poly-friendly therapists out there who can mediate those kinds of things. So, so examine your motives, go gently, and because you need to hash out all kinds of agreements and what you want from it, maybe one person really wants an open relationship and the other person is like, no, not really, but if you want it, I'll have one. You know, that's not a good basis. So you really need to hash it out with somebody. Don't just jump in head first. So gently, and see a therapist if that will help, if you need some help. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Anna first and then Jay.
I would say, like, you don't want to start out, I'm not happy or I want more, because that's usually a very hurtful way. Like, the other person, then it's like, oh, I'm not enough, or you need something else. So, I mean, it's not going to fix a relationship. If you're not in a happy, stable relationship where you communicate, adding more people is going to add more complexity, and it's just going to probably implode. But, you know, if you start out with, like, are you happy with our relationship? Have you felt anything for someone else? And I mean, if you're willing to start out like, I'm okay with you meeting someone else, or you going out, or you having sex with another person, you know, and that's the hardest part. It's really easy to be like, yeah, I get to have sex with other people or more things. It's hard to like sit there and watch your partner go through stuff. I mean, that's where all the jealousy and all the triggers and the idea that you're not enough or insecurities or you're going to lose that person. So, I mean, if you want to open it up, I mean, I would offer it to the other person first. Or at least have that way as dialogue. Because, I mean, usually in relationships, it's not that, like, one person's totally fine and happy and the other person's not. Like, usually if you feel like there's something missing, then maybe the other person will as well. So maybe starting off by asking them how they feel, instead of saying, like, here's where I am, might be an easier way to start it conversation.
Yeah, Jay?
Yeah, and I would like to, I think Dan Savage said something like, you know, if you're interested into opening a relationship, you can open the door a crack. You don't have to blow the door off the hinges. And speaking as someone who's been on the not in the relationship, but the person who is dating someone in the relationship, so the third person, it tends to happen when the couples, and this is just my inductive thing, but when couples start to open up a relationship, then they go and they pedal to the metal, and they tend to kind of overstep. You know, like, what's the hurry? Remember, what's the hurry? Take your time, baby steps. It's not, you know, maybe it's just something you try together first. Maybe you just go to a swinger club, or maybe it's you just have a coffee date with one other person together, or something like this, that you work your way into it and you discuss the path with it. I mean, I think, but it's, you know, you're changing the whole paradigm of your relationship. So in a sense, you're having a new relationship with that same person, like and so you're redefining it, and it's basically a new relationship you're starting.
Yeah, I think I fall somewhere in between you and Anna, where it's the kind of thing where it shouldn't be just about you and it shouldn't be just about your partner. The way I would say to go about it is to think of it as something that you do together. If you involve your partner in what's going on and express that is where this is not about leaving them behind or pushing them aside, it's a new aspect, I suppose, or a new leveling up, I think, in my aspect. But yeah, they might not agree, but yeah, communication again. Mille?
I think it's also, it can be a good idea before opening up that conversation with a partner that you've been with for a long time to consider what's more important for me. Is it more important for me to keep and protect this partner that I'm with and keep this relationship? Am I willing to step back if this person says, no, I don't want an open relationship? Or is it more important for me to actually have an open relationship? Am I willing to leave this person in case that person says no? Because, you know, it might not go well. I think in the polyamory community, we have, as a collective group of people, we have much more bad experiences with trying to open up existing long-term relationships than we have good experiences with it. So it's something that is difficult and might not be successful. So consider how important it is.
Very important.
We have one more online question and one in the room. You mentioned dealing with jealousy earlier. I'd love to hear more about how you dealt with that, how to talk about it, and then a comment. You're all very inspirational. So thank you.
Very nice. Steve?
Well, I'm the relative newbie in the room, so I can sort of tell a little bit about my first experience of dealing with jealousy. I think the first time my partner had a date with another partner, I wasn't sure how to deal with it. You know, I'd read all the books. It said there's an expression we use in poly circles called compersion, and I think in Danish it translates to something like medglad. Medglad.
Very good.
And it's actually about having joy at your partner being in a situation where they're really happy and then they get some sort of fulfillment from it and enjoying it on their behalf and absolutely not having an agenda, you know, not saying, for example, oh, well, you know, I'm glad you had a really nice time. You know, i.e. I didn't have a very nice time. But the first time, and so I contacted my friend who first mentioned polyamory to me 20 years ago when my partner was going out on a date. And I was going to the cinema. I thought, I'm going to go and watch a film on my own. That's something I haven't done for a long time, so I'm going to go and do that. So I went to the cinema and I watched this really difficult, depressing film. And my partner and I had agreed a time, and she would send me a text, and you know, and so we had some agreements and some boundaries and so on. And I really had to fight to look at my watch, but I had spoken to my friend, and he'd given me the pep talk and said, you know, compersion, you know, try and see this as a positive thing. And I'm thinking, oh God. So eventually I come out of the film, and I can see that actually my partner had sent me a text an hour earlier than she had said she would, and everything was fine. And we had also agreed, coming back to the actual question in hand, we had also agreed that we would discuss whether we wanted to talk about that date when we got home, how much detail, and she would leave it in my court, and she was willing to talk about anything. I could ask anything, or nothing, or somewhere in between, or, you know, and she would take it at my pace. She was more experienced in this than I was. So that was an interesting experience, and I think since then, that's 2 years ago now, but since then, yeah, I think when she has a date, I actually do feel something that you could describe as compersion when she goes out. So, you know, I'm really happy for her if it's a good experience for her. So yeah. So I don't know how you get to that point. I'm not sure how I got to that point exactly in my own development, but that's a little bit of an anecdotal experience of what I experienced first time.
Practice, perhaps, I guess. Anna?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think jealousy is a big thing. Like I said, in poly, like, I think every book about poly or every group, like, has something about jealousy. Because I think, like I said, it's not jealousy exists in poly, but poly brings it to the surface. But I think the underlying core of jealousy is usually some kind of fear and insecurity. So, I mean, for me, it's when I feel feelings of jealousy, I try to sit with the feeling, as horrible and uncomfortable and as much as I hate it, to try to like really figure out like what is it actually, like what is, because usually it's a small trigger. I mean, I think I said an example before, it was like, you know, someone like, or, you know, you with your text, like, or people make agreements, like, you know, especially if you're in kind of a hierarchy relationship, that maybe you say, okay, well, you know, you can go on dates with whoever you want, but you always sleep in our bed, or you can have sex with whoever you want, but it can't be, you know, where we have sex, or whatever it is, because it's usually it's kind of something small that's in there that's kind of triggering these feelings, and it's usually kind of like around loss, your fear of losing that person, your fear of that you think they're more special to you than they're gonna think you are to them, or something like that. And I think the more you're comfortable with yourself and you fear that loss less. I mean, I have been with people in poly relationships, and then they have found someone else and decided to be monogamous, so they kind of ended it with me, which sucks because, you know, it, like, in one way, like, I mean, it was hard and it was lost and it was a bit painful, but I mean, I'm happier that they're with the person and in the relationship that makes them happy than just being with me. Because I also have the belief that, you know, even though they found someone else, like, then maybe I'll find someone, right? You know, someone could come at any time and fill that. Like, I don't think love is just a fixed thing and you have like one person forever. I think love comes in and out of your life, and sometimes it is really good with someone for a period, and then you change or they change, and then they drift back out of your life, but then someone else will drift back in.
Yeah? Do you want to?
Yeah, I'll take something quick. I get that question a lot, and I've done this a few times, these panels, and like, what about jealousy? Or if I mentioned polyamory to someone, like, I could never do that. I would get way too jealous. And fair enough. I will say, though, that you know, monogamy is no cure for jealousy. Neither is being single. Like, jealousy still pops up in all those situations. I've seen it in all those. I don't struggle with it so much, and that's just maybe naturally the way I am. I tend to just sort of naturally go to compersion, which really is a good thing, but also kind of sucks, because I really feel sorry for my partner sometimes when they get jealous, because I'm really not so empathetic. I really try to be, but like I don't relate so well to that. It's just that jealousy is not really my monster, and my monster is more envy, which is a little bit more insidious, and they're related, but like yeah, so it's sort of like, okay, I'll try to support you in this, and but you know, like, you should go out and date more. And I don't know. I think I don't have any good 1, 2, 3 steps to get through jealousy. It's just something you have to kind of weather and recognize it is what it is. I mean, it's the fear of losing something you think you have, and if you can somehow come to a place where you feel like, okay, settle down, it's not going anywhere, and at least this event's not going to have any impact on that.
Yeah, I'm just going to point out that was the bell for 7:30. So,
Yep.
But there was one more
we have
question.
about
I think.
13 minutes left.
Oh, we have 13. Cool.
We have 2 questions.
Good. Sorry, 7:15. Yep.
Oh, did Mille have a comment?
Mille, did you want to tie something to
I had a
jealousy?
small comment
Yeah.
on that jealousy
No,
thing.
go for it.
It's just that, in my experience, the jealousy monster tends to get smaller and smaller the more times you experience your partner going out with someone else, going on holidays with someone else, spending time with someone else, and then experience that they do come back and they do still love you. The more times you have that experience, it's like it gets programmed into you that it's not so dangerous that you imagine in the beginning. So the monster gets smaller with time.
So it is like, it was a little bit jokey to say practice, but it is like with everything else, the more times you experience something, the less dangerous it gets. Yeah, you had a question, Charlotte?
I want to go back to the open relationship question that was before, because I'm in a monogamous relationship right now, and it's an ongoing conversation for us whether or not to open, or if we did open, how long could we be monogamous again afterwards, and stuff like that. And I think we started talking about opening our relationship because we were to talk like this together, and we talked about it afterwards, or we saw a movie about someone in a non-monogamous relationship, and then it opened the question for us, and now it's just a conversation. That's not decided yet, but maybe it will be. Maybe we're going to stay like this.
So, yeah, so not really a question as such, but a really good point for the person who had that question, that, yeah, I suppose the way to ease into it is to introduce the concept of polyamory in some other way. Like, yeah, we have the talk now, or movies, or TV series, I think there are now, also sort of touching upon it. Steve?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's great that you're having that dialogue and keeping it open. The dialogue, I mean, not the relationship at the moment, but just the discussion. I think as long as you can keep discussing, that's a very good basis to figure out what you want to do. So, yeah, good. Well done.
Yep.
You might also look up a dynamic relationship, which is a concept that's, I don't know, maybe it's a decade old now, but it's sort of sounds similar to what you're describing. Well, could we open it up for a little while and then go back to being monogamous if our situations change or life situations change, or we're just feeling so-and-so. So you might want to look into that.
There's another question.
Oh, yeah. We have about 10 minutes left, so think about your questions.
Yes, that's a follow-up to the dating question, because all of you answered about online dating. What about the live version? What about the bar, what you call it, lightning dating, whatever it's called? What about the person you really like in real life you already know? How do you talk to them about it?
Well, Steve?
I mean, I don't have massive experience with. I mean, usually if I'm considering dating someone, it's a very short time before we start talking to whether we decide to meet up for coffee or whatever. So we try to. I like to meet them in person before we get too involved in that back and forwards, because I figure that you can talk and talk and talk and talk things to death, and eventually maybe nothing comes of it. So so I think sort of just a couple of mails back and forwards. Do we click? Do we have? And then when we do it live, IRL, as the young people once said. Maybe they don't say that anymore. I'm too old. But yeah, but that's my own experience. I don't know of any clubs or any specific places you can go and do this kind of thing, though. So no.
Anna, did you have a comment as well?
Yeah. Well, just that it's still hard. Like, I mean, when I meet people and I'm not aware if they're single or not. I'm also really bad. Like, if someone in real life just like flirts, sometimes I don't really notice it. But if I think that someone might be flirting, or I know that they're single or whatever, I tend to just sort of like truth bomb it, because I don't really know. Like, I don't have a good way to bring it up. But you're just like, yeah, well, these few people that I'm dating. Oh, did I mention I'm poly? And just boop. And then they either like look in horror and like find a way to leave, or they go, oh, wait, poly, what's that? But I don't have a good way of doing it. I just kind of just was like, there it is, and then see what happens. But I'd rather do that than like not bring it up, because if you don't say it in the beginning, like then sometime later, second date or whatever, and when do you say those kinds of things? So I just kind of boop right up front. As awkward as it is, it's better to be awkward in the beginning.
It only gets more awkward if you don't say it, though. I mean, like, and it becomes this bigger skeleton in the closet. Like, now how do we bring it out? But it's a good question. I think it's just like the answer would be like, dating is just really complicated anyway. I mean, it shouldn't be, but it is. I mean, someone asked me out, and it was someone from my real life world, wouldn't necessarily know what my relationship status was, or if I was open or not. She just asked, hey, you want to meet up for a beer or coffee sometime? And the thing was like, yeah, I would like to meet this person. And we're chatting, and then it's like, well, okay, I don't know if that was actually a date, or maybe she just wanted to hang out because we did this thing before, and she wanted to catch up as friends. Like, and so how do I say this without letting her, with having her save face, that like. So I just had to, well, by the way, I'm not sure what your intentions were, but just so you know, I want to tell you ahead of time that I'm in a relationship. It's open, but if that affects your motivation for meeting, then I want to let you know beforehand, because I don't want to waste your time. And she's like, well, thanks for being honest, and we still met as friends, but it is tricky, right? Like you don't want to say if you don't want to like, embarrass someone who is like, oh, I just asked you out because I wanted to like get your input on this project I'm working on. I wasn't asking you for a date. I don't care about your weird kinky sex stuff you're doing. So I mean. But I think there's still, honesty is the best policy with that, just to clear the air before, so you don't have a bigger and bigger skeleton in the closet.
Mille?
As I mentioned before, I have had some of these really awkward situations with particularly slightly older men. I'm 48, so some of the men who flirt with me in parties are like in their 50s or a bit older, and have some of them fantasize about having an affair, right? So when people start flirting with me in a party, I have an agreement with myself that I don't even kiss anybody until it's out on the table that I'm polyamorous and what that means. So I'm very upfront, but I don't drop the bomb. I sort of find a way of sneaking the word polyamory into a sentence somewhere, or sneaking my other partner into the sentence or something, and then if they sort of push on, like, and I get the feeling that they might be wanting to have a secret affair or a quick fuck out back without the wife knowing, then I sort of ask, do you mind that I just go and check with your wife that she's okay with it? And that usually ends it.
Very good. Charlotte, are there more questions?
It's very upfront, I would say. We have about 6 minutes left, so if there are any last-minute questions, put your hand up. Yep.
Oh, yep.
One,
And
and
that's
then
it.
closing up,
Okey-dokey.
yeah?
Yep.
What are your experience about living together with more partners?
Anyone? No?
I all I can say is I haven't done it, so I have that to experience later on. But
I like my own space.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I haven't tried it either. I have friends who have, but they're not really, their stories to tell, not mine. But again, communication has been a massive thing in that aspect, I will say that much.
There are a few people who live a poly community together of 3, 4, 5 people. They do exist here and there in Denmark, but they are a minority within the minority. There are not many of them. I know of a few cases where the relationship consists of 3 or 4 people, but then it's closed, so they don't have other partners except the ones who live together. That tends to be the more common model that I know of.
Cheaper rent, yeah, that'd probably be the big incentive, especially after the economy tanks and we all have to live in together. We'll all be polyamorous. It's the future, guys. Hook yourself up into a polycule, like.
Yeah, I mean, I will say without giving away anyone's stories that I know they've had a lot of discussing boundaries, not rules, but just way of coexisting, and that takes a lot of talk before you even enter into it. And then again, with you, they have, if the door's closed, for example, you don't enter. There are some signals for I need my own personal space now, because otherwise it very easily becomes a massive communal, you're no longer a separate entity. It's like all 4 of us are now one entity, and that sort of comes back to even in monogamous relationships where you become a unit and not 2 separate people. So yeah, back to communication and boundary setting, I think. Charlotte, a last question?
Last question. I haven't checked the iPad though, but I'll do that afterwards.
So I have one comment first about the opening up an existing relationship. So I did that, and it works for us. The way we got into it is that we first did our research, we first read books about it, and then we discussed, is this something we want to do, and the baby steps. So that's just a little add-on. And then a question for the panel. Is there any stuff about polyamory that you're struggling with, and maybe even one of the other panelists has some input on it?
Yeah, the dark side of the sun, I was about to say. Things you struggle with, things you found difficult about being polyamorous. Steve?
I don't know if this is something I personally struggle with, but I know it's a very common issue, is we move at our own speed, and so whatever relationships we're in, there can be conflicts around that, or not conflicts. It sounds much more dramatic than it actually is. Usually about the degree of openness, how flat the structure is, that kind of thing. There can be issues around that. One person wants to keep it very hierarchical, another wants to keep it more fluid and more flat, and those are always ongoing negotiations. So as we keep coming back to every time in every answer, I think I've heard communication. It's ongoing, and I think my relationships are all dynamic. So in that sense, they are what they are now because that's what we've agreed they are, and that's how we feel at the moment. But things can shift. It's like the tectonic plates. Things can move around, and suddenly you need to figure out a new reality, a new situation. So that doesn't mean we're not committed to each other, but but we recognize that there's a dynamism in all relationships, monogamous as well as polyamorous. So we're just trying to accommodate for that by creating dialogue and discussion all the way through. So yeah, I wouldn't say these were necessarily my issues, the dark side for me, but I am aware that this can be one of those key areas. Yeah.
Jay?
Yeah, I think I mentioned my my monster is envy, and I've and my friends too that are in poly relationships or open relationships. What tends to happen is sort of there's one person will have the monsoon season and the other's in the desert, and then it switches back, and but like there's this period where your partner is and my girlfriend's hot, so she's out there like she has an easy time with it sometimes, like I would say, and my previous girlfriend who was an open relationship also was had a much easier time than I did, so and it wasn't like that I was jealous. I was really, really happy and excited for the fact that I thought that was really exciting that she would go out on a date or she meet someone. I was like, I got the night to do something I want to do, and she's going to be super happy. But after a while, it starts to wear like, well, I'd really like to have a little sugar this way too, and that's hard, because it's. That's just a normal cycle. It happens when you're single too. You'll have these monsoon seasons and deserts, and it's the same pattern when you're in an open relationship, and it's just a matter of like how you feel about yourself and your confidence, and just maybe it's just luck and all these other factors, but it's just a fact of life, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. We have hit 7:30. Did you have any last comments, Anna or Mille?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, the hardest struggle is having different expectations. I mean, I've met people that I feel strongly for, but they're not in a place where they can be, as strong, or, they have some kind of primary thing, or I don't have as strong of feelings for someone else who feels more strongly for me, and they want, more out of the relationship than what I want out of it. I think, like, that, at least for me, is the hardest thing. And also, kind of being more solo poly, people think that just means you don't want to commit to anyone. And as I want serious relationships, I enjoy having them. I don't want to, go through our bank accounts together. And I like having my apartment that people visit, but no one moves in. But that doesn't mean that I don't want someone serious or to have relationships forever. And I think that, because solo poly is a very, very small minority of poly itself, right? So you're like going from just poly to like solo poly, and like it's not very well understood. So that's been my personal struggle.
So standard issues with being a minority within a minority. Right, that's all we have time for. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you to Anna, Jay, Mille, and Steve, and thank you for your questions.